Welcome to another episode of Rose Resource Room. Today I'm here with Ralph Rodriguez from the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I
That's right.
almost said authority. Welcome. How are you?
I'm well, Ro. How about yourself?
I am good, and thank you so much for being on the show. I wanted to have you on for a couple reasons. One, you are new to New Jersey in terms of being our attorney. And
Hmm.
two, I saw a fabulous article from Leah, Homeschool New York, and I was like, oh no, we need to get him on to share these like in person. So, well,
Yeah.
thankful to have you today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad you said as far as being an attorney. I think you and I talked about this. I lived in New Jersey for 4 years, in Bergen County. Now back across the river where I grew up, in Westchester, New York. But who knows where the Lord is going to lead us. We loved our time in New Jersey. But yeah, I am. New Jersey was one of my states of responsibility at HSLDA.
Perfect. What other states do you cover?
So that would be New York being my by far what keeps me most busy. And I also have Connecticut, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And we know that Connecticut just passed a difficult bill. It's now law. The governor signed it a few weeks ago. So that goes into effect next year, and then the year after, there's kind of stages. So that'll also present some challenges for both myself and the members that I serve.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Tell us about your journey to HSLDA.
Yeah, so my legal career started at Alliance Defending Freedom. Hopefully, most of you watching are aware of that organization. You've heard about it, perhaps related to Supreme Court cases, but it is a religious liberty legal organization dedicated to defending really five areas. First being religious liberty, but also parental rights, free speech, marriage and family, and the sanctity of life. However, I got started at ADF International. And so Alliance Defending Freedom is well known in the country. I think they're up to about 18 Supreme Court victories since 2010. And so praise God for that. But ADF International is a little lesser known within the country. And so that is a part of the organization, and they are focused on being present at the international institutions, one of the most prominent being the United Nations. That was the part that I was involved in, but they're also present at the European Court of Human Rights, the Organization of American States, and others. So it's present here in the States and also in Europe, even in parts of Asia and India. And so the idea there is to be present at those institutions because, especially the United Nations, you see that this is these places are the locations where the nexus of really bad policy ideas, as you and I see it, get their genesis. Um, and so we could talk about it in a little bit. But I spent 6 years there, so that was the start of my legal career, and then transitions after I was with the UN team for 3 years, transitioned to our Church and Ministry Alliance team, and so that was actually a program that Mike Farris started in 2018 when he was still CEO at ADF. And it was patterned after HSLDA's membership program. So the
Mm.
idea was to provide legal resources to churches and ministries in a proactive sense so that they can be equipped with legal resources and just good governance internally should a religious liberty dispute ever arise within their organization. So I was doing that for about 3 years, and then some changes were happening at the organization, and I was faced with a decision as to whether I would move to Virginia. Once again, being a lifelong New Yorker, and then a 4 year pause in New Jersey. So all of our family is up here. I've been in my same church community that I was born into, Manhattan Grace Tabernacle. So it was a major decision to make. My wife Brianna and I were praying all last summer, Lord, please lead us, guide us. We took a trip to Virginia to kind of scout out some land, and we were taking it pretty seriously, but we still felt the pull to remain in New York. So fast forward to about the end of July 2025. Saw the posting at HSLDA, and I also saw that they were open to remote work, and found out at the back end that that was because they wanted somebody present in New York. But as I'm able to talk about this and look back, it was the Lord leading us all the way. He wanted us to remain in New York. He's not finished with me in our church community. He has a lot of work for me to do there. And so it was just God's providence in leading me to HSLDA. Also, knowing all the work that I've been able to do with Alliance Defending Freedom, it absolutely prepared me for the work that I do today. So sorry if that was a bit of a long-winded answer, gave you a lot of background, but that's how I'm here today.
No, that's perfect. I appreciate the background because, you can't make this up. When you hear these stories and you hear it in one soundbite, you're like, oh my gosh, God is so amazing. And He is. And you see God's providence and you see His sovereignty. At the same time, you've shared how difficult it can be to make major decisions during your formative years while,
Hmm.
carrying that pressure of getting it right. So I think this resonates with almost anyone, but especially for homeschool families who are constantly navigating decisions around academics, athletics, music opportunities, and the calling of servanthood all while trying to prepare children not only for graduation, but for
Hmm.
eternity. What would you say in terms of like any kind of wisdom you can share, any kind of perspective for parents who are feeling that weight of balancing? Like you and your wife had to make the difficult decision. You stayed in
Hmm.
prayer. What perspective or wisdom would you share with parents who feel the weight of balancing present success with eternal purpose?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I would often tell people when we were praying about the decision, you're not going to find us wearing an I Love New York t-shirt. We don't have a just a fuzzy feeling when it comes to being in New York, especially New York City. It's a tough place to be, tough place to raise a family. But we really felt that sense of belonging and calling to the Lord's work that's occurring here. And so you really have to be in tune with that because when we took that weekend trip to Virginia, there were a lot of warm fuzzies going on, especially on the part of my wife. She said, "Hey, like the the waiters treat us differently at restaurants, and
Yeah.
I feel totally comfortable speaking with strangers on the street, and it's just a different dynamic in Northern Virginia." But we couldn't be led by those emotions. We had to really, follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. And so I would say when it comes to present success versus eternal purpose, we need not discount either of them, but we
Mhm.
absolutely need to balance them, right? So we all want our children to succeed academically, professionally. We want to make sure that we continue to show the world that homeschooling works and it leads to successful lives on the part of our children. But that doesn't have to be sacrificed. Our eternal purpose doesn't have to be sacrificed on that altar. So I'm reminded of Jesus' words when he says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? And so, as Christian homeschooling families, especially, we want to be mindful of the fact that we are stewarding people here when it comes to homeschooling our children. We are investing in their very souls.
Mm.
So, I would say that comes first and foremost. I want my daughter and my child that's coming in September to be good people, to be good citizens, to love others. And then I think academic success follows. I would say, we have to have our priorities in order and make sure that, we're raising children with good character. And we know that faithfulness produces good fruit, and that can't be measured in a transcript.
Mm.
And so that's what I would say.
That's a mic drop. I love that because you talked about investing in souls, and I know there's some mornings where I wake up and when my kids first see me, they see their mom, right? And they want the hugs, they want all the things, and I give them that. But the first thought is, okay, I have brains to educate, right? It's like you want to open their brain, pour the things in, and then you can do all the things. So it's really hard to balance the need for, creating this good citizen, and then you want to have this well-rounded child who can either play an instrument or a sport or speak 10 languages or all the things. And then some days you have a day where you're like, oh, we rocked today out, and you're like, oh, we didn't do the Bible study, right? Or the flip, right? Like you have the days when you have this amazing Bible study and you're like, we didn't get to anything else, right? Because you went down the rabbit trail. So it's really hard
Mhm.
to balance, but I love how you put it all together in terms of first things first and priorities. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And I would say just one more thing. My daughter
Yeah.
is 2 and full of energy. So I'm the one who tends to put her to bed most nights, give my wife a little bit of a break at the end of the night. And so I'll say, okay, Catherine, pick out a book. We'll read before we pray. And more times than not, she picks out three. And so, depending on the length of those books that she picked out, I'll say, okay, let's read the books. I want to make sure that, we're getting good reading time in. Um, Yet, you have to understand, okay, she needs sleep. She needs to go to bed at the right time. So, that's a balancing act as well. I want to spend more time with her. She with me. She wants to read, but maybe it's two books tonight. Maybe it's all three, right? So we're constantly faced with those decisions.
Yeah,
And I don't need to necessarily tell any parent that, but I think it's just a ripe example of, the decisions that you're faced with that don't even seem like major decisions in the moment, but we're all stewarding our children with these decisions that we make.
that's right. Absolutely. I wanted to go back to something you shared when you were talking about your work with ADF.
Hmm.
You once described your work with Alliance Defending Freedom as feeling like holding back the dam, right, against the tidal wave of
Hmm.
anti-family and culture of death agendas. Can you unpack what you meant by that? Like, what are some of the cultural, legal, or even educational battles that are happening behind the scenes that most of us may not fully see or understand?
Yeah, so that was more so related to my work with ADF International at the United Nations.
Hmm.
So one great example is that, also just to unpack a little bit of how UN work works, is that most things are forged by consensus. So you have, all these member states present at the United Nations, and I forget the exact number, over 200. Um, and so anything that the United Nations puts forth has to be forged by consensus. All member states have to agree when, they're proposing a resolution, or, they are reaffirming something that was found in a treaty document. And so you look at international law
Hmm.
when it comes to treaty law, and the right to life is actually robustly protected, and I would say uplifted when we look at these core documents. And so, the liberal agenda obviously doesn't like that. And so there's a very extreme concerted effort to create an international right to abortion by state consensus.
Hmm.
And so when I say that they are just relentless in trying to be very crafty and savvy in putting euphemistic language into resolutions that are, mind you, non-binding, but I don't want to get too technical, but it's how consensual international law works. So it's incremental. You get one resolution passed, you get another passed, you get, a nice statement written by a group of states. And I'm sorry, when I say states, I mean nations.
Hmm.
I've put on my international lawyer hat on. Um, and so really it's incremental, right? And so our job at ADF International and other organizations who form the pro-life consensus at the UN was to hold back the dam, meaning prevent that incrementalism, right? So if you picture a large and robust dam, um, sometimes there can be holes, right? And you have to patch up those holes.
Hmm.
You have to make sure that the infrastructure is fortified. And so that's what we were doing. We were working with a small contingent of pro-life member states, mostly from Africa and the Middle East. So you're talking Muslim majority countries, not the same bedfellows that you would see in United States kind of coalition. But these are countries that respect family ideals, and they don't want to see abortion being normalized. And so that was our coalition. And so once again, it's incrementalism. And if we look at it from a homeschooling lens, this is incremental regulation of homeschooling, right? It's just an annual notice bill, or an attempt to redefine parental authority, or policies that weaken family autonomy, educational initiatives that shift responsibility from parents to institutions. Isolated, they seem like you know not really problematic. The world is not going to end if one of these things occur, but taken together, that incrementalism can absolutely turn into a tidal wave, as you mentioned.
Thank you for sharing that because again, when you're not in the weeds or in the trenches of things that are happening, you probably see one bill passed here and Connecticut is right there. Like we're so close to Connecticut and Connecticut enjoyed so many freedoms. So it took us back so far based on what happened with them legislatively. So what role do parents play in preserving that freedom and like faithfully stewarding the opportunities that we have as, our God-given right to educate our children? We know what you're doing, whether it's through ADF in your past or HSLDA, whether it's a state
Mhm.
or, but what is the role of the parent?
Yeah, great question. I would say first things first, continue doing what you're doing. Faithfully homeschool your children. Be a representative role model for the homeschool community. And that means, not just educating your children and making sure that they are learning and excelling in their academics, but continue to show up to the co-ops, continue to show up to the conventions and things that make the homeschool community that much more rich. And so continue to do those things and shine brightly at them. Don't be ashamed when somebody asks you or your family or your child, at 11 a.m. at the supermarket, oh, hey, you're not in school? Are you sick? No, we homeschool.
That's
And
right.
don't be bashful to say that, right? Just make sure that the homeschool story is one that's told loud and proud. There's nothing that we have to be ashamed of when we talk about homeschooling. And then I would say from the policy perspective, be informed. So take a look at the alerts that we put out at HSLDA and also enjoy. Make sure that you know what's going on in your legislature. And so, when the time comes for a call to action, you're not scrambling and wondering what your email is going to say to your legislature or even the governor or somebody else who has a stake in the policy outcome. So make sure that you're informed. And when it comes time, maybe it's a committee hearing or maybe it's a rally or whatever, speak respectfully but firmly. Know what you believe and know why you are homeschooling, why you chose to do this for your family, and why these policy proposals are going to infringe on your freedom to be able to do those things. We shouldn't shy away from participating in civic life because if we do so, then we're going to sacrifice our ability to take advantage of these freedoms.
Mm, thank you for sharing that. I think what people may not realize is that often the greatest work is preventative. So, like you're saying, make sure that you have that email ready to go. Make sure you have your talking points. Don't scramble at the last minute. So, the flip side of the question is have an organization stand in the gap like HSLDA and Joy Homeschool New Jersey and advocating quietly behind the scenes and helping families avoid those challenges. What would
Mhm.
you say is the point of joining one of our organizations since right now everything is quiet and people may not see the need to do so?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, this is brass tacks. Your joining of our organizations helps us to exist. For so long, HSLDA literally existed on membership dollars. And when I think about God's providence when it comes to that, the membership fee at HSLDA is, I'm sorry, it's very nominal. It's
Mhm.
$15 a month, $150 a year. Or if you want to be ambitious and go for a lifetime membership, it's $1,500 for the lifetime, and that's for your whole family.
Yeah.
So if you have 8 or 9 kids, like some of my colleagues do, and you're homeschooling for well more than 20 years, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
And just think about, if you've ever had a legal issue or you've needed to consult with an attorney, legal bills are significant. So I would say the benefit of joining HSLDA is that you get a dedicated team of legal professionals that are going to be with you every step of the way in your homeschool journey. So it's not just legal issues, it's how do I start homeschooling? And so the legal issues there can be, okay, I want to withdraw my child in New Jersey, but the school district or the principal is telling me I need to fill out this form. And so maybe you absolutely know the law, and you know that New Jersey doesn't currently require that. yet you need an advocate on your side. So I'm able to write a simple email or a simple letter just reminding the school district of what they already know, but making sure that they, act appropriately and accordingly. So you have an advocate on your side, and you have an organization that has 40 years of, runway in terms of successful advocacy for homeschool freedom. And so I'm really blessed to be a part of that because I can speak to the success that HSLDA has had before my time here. And so, that's key as well. I think also, you join with a community, and this is more germane to, joining somebody like Enjoy New Jersey, because you're with your neighbors, your brothers and sisters in the fight. And so you go to co-ops and communities and events, not just the once a year convention, but something that is going to, encourage you along the way. On a random Tuesday morning when you're like, man, did I make the right decision here? Should I be, sending my child off to public school? You get that, encouragement, that boost, when you join a community. So I would say those are the top three things for joining organizations like ours.
I appreciate you for highlighting them. You did a really good job at talking about like why we should take proactive measures and be preventative in order to strengthen the movement for years to come.
Mhm.
Without fear-mongering, obviously, but just to be educational, what challenges do you see on the horizon for homeschooling?
Yeah, I would say there's a few out there. One thing is increased data collection. And so we see that on the rise with these annual notice proposals. You hear policymakers, legislatures, district officials saying, "We don't know where our children are." I'll pause there. They're not your children.
That's right.
So, and they're not my children. If I'm talking to a parent out there, they're your children. So if you ever hear that from an official, you can kindly but firmly say, I'm sorry, Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, they're not your children. But they like to say that we need to know where our children are. There's a truancy problem, and we acknowledge that it's legitimate. But so they want to see, okay, if X amount of students are quote unquote missing from public school rolls, how many of those are homeschoolings? And so, that is something that's out there, and so they want data. I would say another thing is standardization.
Mm.
And so there's a pressure to look at all educational models as uh, the same and look at non-traditional educational models as presumptively suspect. So, presuming that public education is the model to aspire to and to have a standard put up for. And so, we definitely see that happening with curriculum standards and portfolios. And the question for me is, well, who says that that is the most effective way to educate a child?
Mm.
We all know the data. We all know the numbers that are out there when it comes to uh, the lack of public school success. We know that students are failing to read at certain grade levels or pass proficiency tests, and things are graded on a curve. We've seen that, and so then it becomes, well, what do we do about that, or how do we respond to that in a positive way, in a proactive way? I would say, once again, tell the homeschool story. Talk about if you were homeschooled as a now parent. You know, talk about your current success, and now your ability to translate that to your children. And I would say, lastly, is and these are not it's not an exhaustive list, but I don't want to be overly verbose. Is I would call it cultural polarization. So, ever since the pandemic, homeschooling has just even more so exploded. And so that speaks a little bit of the truancy issue we were talking about. But as homeschooling becomes more and more visible and more diverse, you can't put homeschoolers in a political box or a cultural box. I would say it brings opportunity, but it absolutely brings scrutiny. And so as we become more and more visible, uh, go ahead into the mainstream of education and culture, that is going to invite scrutiny, and it invites scrutiny in the legislatures, in popular culture, social media, and so that presents an opportunity for us. And you're going to get tired of me saying this, but tell your story. Make sure that you know why you homeschool. Why is it important to you as a family? What benefits does it bring, not just to your children, but to yourself? How many more hours do you get a day to spend with your children? That you're not, wrangling with them at 6 p.m. to get their homework done, to finish dinner, to shower, to get ready for the next day all over again. That those are no small things. And I would say, as the family goes, we know as the family goes, society goes. So, because homeschooling strengthens the family unit and it allows more natural bonding time and just it's family life as it should be, then we're going to have a strong society. And so we should be careful to remind people of that. That when you seek to regulate homeschooling life, and make it like everything else in public life, you are undermining something that can absolutely strengthen society.
Those were really, really amazing points. And I wanted to highlight a couple of things that you said because if you're unaware and someone like an elected official or politician says, oh, we want to keep our children safe, people are like, oh, that's so sweet. He said our children. She said our children. No, we are not co-parenting with the government. This is not our children. But I love how you called it out because it's so subtle and
Hmm.
it really sounds beautiful. Like, oh, our children. No, no, no. These are not our children. I really
Right.
appreciate that you called that out. The other thing you said was grading on the curve. I've heard things of that nature before, but I didn't fully understand what that meant. I was
Hmm.
speaking to a current teacher, and she said to me, Bro, if a child gets, and I'm not sure the number, I think it's 52. If a child gets below 52, you give them a 52. So a child sits and there's a test and they do not pick up their pencil. So they get a 0. And the grade that goes on the report is 52. I was blown away. I don't know if this matters by state. She's not from Jersey. But when she said that to me, I said, this can't be. What do you mean you get a 0, but you write a 52? Like whatever that number is. That's ridiculous.
Mind you, I don't. It sounds like you've never done that as a teacher.
Absolutely not. I'm so tough. But
Right. Right.
that's ridiculous. And then, the other thing you talked about was the whole innocent until proven guilty is how American culture has been. That's why we have the legal system, right? Like you did
Hmm.
something, did you really? All right, let's prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's not what it is. We're just immediately seen as other. And
Yeah.
thankfully, because of the pandemic, it changed. It's not a us versus them as much, but they're still trying to make everyone seem like a monolith and put everyone in the same box. But it's really interesting how our American values have changed to now it's like, oh, you homeschool? Oh, you must be trying to hide something. That's not okay.
Or even if you object to a certain policy proposal, like, what are you doing, freedom-loving person? What do you have to hide?
I know.
And as you said, that's not how American society works.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I'll say is the very reason or the very gift of homeschooling is that freedom, is that flexibility. But all these laws and bills and proposals are trying to take that away. So you
Hmm.
say, okay, I can test my child orally, or I can give them a written test, but it may not be on this frequency, or I can test them more, whatever you want to do, because you have the
Hmm.
freedom and the flexibility to do so. Now these bills say, no, 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 this is how you need to do it. You may say, think of like a Tiger Woods or a Serena Williams, who they were homeschooled, and you saw that professionally they were going towards sports. You may have a child who's professionally, going towards business or sports or music or whatever, and you may say, I'm going to give them the balanced education, but I'm also going to put a little bit more focus on where I see them going. They're saying, no,
Hmm.
no, no, you got to cover Lyme disease. You have to cover like all these random things. Domain knowledge is important. You want your children to have a broad level of information, but a lot of this times it's like it's a just in case education. Well, we don't know what they're going to be, so might as well just teach them just in case. And
Hmm.
honestly, like who remembers all that stuff after the test? Because there's no passion or value behind it. We're not saying, hey, this is important because you may need to do ABC. It's just remember it, pass the test, and you'll never need it another day in your life.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're speaking my language. You're speaking the language of a lot of homeschool advocates out there. We shouldn't presume that this is the right way to do things.
Yeah.
And mind you, the model of public education, and this is a history lesson that I'm not equipped to teach, but the model of public education is not, the norm for uh, this country's history, or even, the history going back to, the ancient days. I mean, the the government did not have a monopoly on educating children up until very recently.
Right.
So the fact that we treat it as normal, or others folks treat it as normal, and this is just the way it is, and deal with it. It's a very recent phenomena, and we should be mindful to remind folks as such.
Correct. And I feel myself getting on my soapbox, so I'm going to calm myself down. But I will say that, and the idea wasn't academics or education or brilliance or intelligence. It was create a worker bee, raise your hand, ask for permission, get to school on time, create a docile person, right? Like, and if that's not what you want for your children, then we have a
Yeah.
solution for you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could get up on a soapbox as well. I think I'll just say this, especially when it comes to high school students. So you look at a 12th grade senior, and then the decisions that they have to make, and I'm looking at the public school model for a minute. You look at the decisions that they have to make early on in the year when it comes to their decisions to go to college, or pursue a vocation. Let's just look at like basics.
Hmm.
They have to go from asking permission to use the restroom to making these significant decisions about their lives in a span of a few months, and then being expected to make the right decision because there's a lot of money at stake and there's a lot of time at stake. So what's wonderful about homeschooling, and I'm not saying this about all public school educated children, but I would say that homeschool students are perhaps a little bit more prepared to deal with those decisions, because we treat education and stewarding the person as a holistic endeavor.
Hmm.
And so, the problematic thing about a public high school student is that everything is put in such a box, and they're being asked to make these drastic decisions, and I don't know that they're necessarily equipped to do so. And that's
To
just
no fault of their own.
right, exactly. And that's just yet another benefit of the homeschool model.
Thank you for sharing. Any final thoughts as we wrap?
So I would say that just being thrust into the homeschool community, in these, I think it's been 8 months since I've been with HSLDA. We're not new to homeschooling per se, in that, I was exposed to it at Alliance Defending Freedom. And so, we were always convinced, my wife and I, that we were going to homeschool. But I would say in these past 8 months, I've been so encouraged by just how dynamic the community is, even from state to state. You can't, obviously, there's laws and regulations that speak to that, but you can't necessarily say that a homeschool family in New Jersey is the same as New York.
Yeah.
There's such diversity, there's such diverse opportunities available. And so I've been so encouraged by that, because, we're excited once Catherine turns of age, to officially homeschool. But, we're already homeschooling, at the young age of 2. And she's loving it. She loves what her mom is able to prepare for her. And so we're excited to continue to walk through this journey with you all. As much as I am a resource legally to you all, I would say you guys are a resource to me. When you talk about your story, or when we're on the phone, and we're talking about what's going on with you and the district, I'm learning from you. And I would say that is so valuable. And I'm excited to continue to walk through it. We know we have some challenges legislatively on the horizon, and we're going to walk through those together. But don't be afraid. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to get this done right, and to make sure that homeschool freedom in New Jersey is preserved. And hopefully New Jersey can be a model for positive legislation across the country, as we seek to undo bad legislation elsewhere.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time. My regards to your wife, and thank you for all you do for the community.
Thank you, Rose. Great being here. Look forward to talking again soon.
Same here.